Why would you choose to board at 8? Listen, my sister-in-law sends her children to a school in central London, Chelsea, and she's going through what I describe as hell at the moment with, I've got to be careful what I say, but with this 3 plus or 4 plus or 7 plus or 8 plus, 9 plus, 10 plus, 11 plus, there's so much pressure, but of the wrong sort. And there's a problem with resilience, and dare I say it, I'm a parent myself, and the helicopter parenting thing of cotton wooling all of our children's experiences is a real problem. Boarding offers the experience for your children to be themselves, to develop their characters, to develop their own way of living, their own way of thinking, without being constantly under the arm, under the umbrella of mum or dad. And of course, the parent's role is, there's nothing more important or nothing more powerful than the parent's role. But there's just a little bit too much of the wrong, from myself included sometimes, a little bit too much of the wrong sort of help, leaping in, smoothing out their experiences, trying to make everything perfect for them.
The traditional time to start the boarding experience was 8, and Tom does have a smaller group at the bottom of Cottesmore, but that do what's called full boarding at 8. And I, as a parent, the idea of sending my child off at 8 for a full boarding was it wasn't for me. I couldn't have been the supportive parent for the boarding experience. But Tom would tell me that is my problem, not my son's problem, and that actually...
Absolutely, 100%.
And that full boarding is not kiss them goodbye at the beginning of term, pick them up at half term, and I think that's very much the case, isn't it? You say that the longest that you wouldn't see them for is how long?
It's 2.5 weeks max. Yeah.
And so just
it used to be you drop them off in September and said see you at Christmas, and it's Tom Brown school days and all that. It's just so long gone, and there's so many different things. Are we going to speak about that?
Yes.
You're going to maybe speak about that later, how things have changed, but that's one of the ways.
I think, though, all boarding preps have more entry points later on as the independent education system has changed, and they may not necessarily sing and dance about it, but they will recognise that you can have, and you would say that it may be year 3 and 4, and I think this is particularly relevant for London parents who maybe, as I did, had my children in a co-ed local primary that they could walk to school with. It was very cosy and close, that went from 5 to 11. But my youngest child, we wanted to move to a boarding school at 13. So you have this strange 2 years when what are you going to do with them when they're in year 7 and 8? And in the London system doesn't really cater for it, or some London schools do, but not the one that we were in. And the reality is that year 5 and 6 in those schools is all geared towards the 11 plus. And if you're not doing that, your education and what you're doing suddenly becomes very narrow. And so that for us, and I think Tom would say that probably you should move probably by the start of year 5. Would you say that was correct?
I'm absolutely not saying you should move, because I've been in trouble with the headmasters that I know so well in London. It's just they do. Yeah. For the ones that want to avoid this sort of hair loss situation and stress and greying of the 11 plus and the 10, however many other pluses there are, they do tend to, the parents that want to, tend to move in year 5, so when they're 10.
Yeah.
So we have a variety of people who move, especially from a particular Chelsea school at that particular point.
Not just Chelsea. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that sort of dealt with starting with at the very beginning, coming into a prep school further down the line for whatever reason to tie into a London education. And then the next sort of obvious moving point is to move to a boarding school for secondary. And traditionally, 11 plus boarding would be for girls' schools. And there are a number of leading girls' schools who do still start their full boarding at 11 plus. And Tom, who runs a co-ed school, he would not, I think I'm right in saying, send your girls to that at 11 plus. That's correct? You would wait and have a go into the 13 plus entry.
The headmistresses of these schools are hugely supportive of the 13 plus exit, 13 plus entrance. I was just talking to Eve Jardine-Young, who was here a couple of hours ago talking, and she said we've actually released 50 more places for 13 plus for the girls who want to come. Peter's nodding his head. Did she say that in her talk? No, she didn't say that in her talk. Well, I'm saying it for her. And so that endorsement of those wonderful years at prep school, years 7 and 8, or when you're between 11 and 13, is very much entrenched in these in the public schools, in the girls' public schools. So Benenden have been very, very kind to Cottesmore and the schools that go 13 plus, and Cheltenham have, and Down House, and there's a very, very clear understanding of that 13 plus, the benefit of 13 plus. If you're at London and you go to a school that ends at 11 plus, then of course that's a fantastic thing to be able to do, to go to Down or to go to any of these schools at 11. But there's a great swathe of schools that
take some leaving London at 11 plus as well, not just the ones who are avoiding the 11 plus?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's quite a rush sometimes if people come a bit late, so the last 2 years, if we have a place for them. It's quite a rush, but it depends on the child. Sometimes they pick it up in seconds, sometimes they need more time. But yeah, there is very much not an entrance point, but we're very, we try to be very empathetic towards people who want a place that late because they've struggled with the idea of boarding at 8, but by the time the child's 10 or the girl or boy is 10, they're climbing up the walls and they need much more interesting experiences, and they need more grounds, and they need more ability to go and climb a tree or build a camp or do all the things that you want them to do. Then they will they'll make an 11 plus entry if we've got a space. Yeah.
And then the second obvious point is to go from 13 plus, so to go into a traditional, there used to be boys, then there are many co-ed public school at 13 plus, which is where Tom would send his children on to, leading public schools. He would say that it's much better to have gone before, not to start at 13. I think it's very much horses for courses. I mean, do you want to talk about that?
Well, you've had both. You've had children who've done both.
Yes. He hasn't moved at 13 yet, the other one.
Emily thinks it's fine, day school up until 13, and then off you go to boarding school, and it worked. Your son, obviously, it worked for him. But I've also known cases. I've been a teacher for a very long time. I've been a teacher in London for 10 years, and I saw many times, and again, I've got to be careful what I say, but I saw many times people go off cold from day school, let's say south of the river, to Eton it was, and they found it very difficult, and within about 3 weeks he was back at Dulwich College, and I've seen it, personally I've seen it not work. You've seen it work, and I've seen it not work. So I would always recommend boarding before, because it's a fantastic segue, and it works very smoothly.
So that's up to prep. Then secondary school boarding, I think, again, you need to look around to think what it is that you want for your family dynamic. I
think we were talking about this yesterday, and it's really important that you get under the skin of the precise type of boarding school that you're looking at. And I can give you a few questions afterwards if you want, but you've got to ask some really, really serious questions, and you've got to ask the correct questions about its full boardingness, its full boarding attributes. You've got to get that right, otherwise you're sending them to a place that isn't a full boarding school. And there are a lot of public schools that are close to the M25, which have become, and they're unbelievably brilliant schools, but they've become weekly boarding schools.
Which may work for your dynamic, but you've got to know that's what you're signing up for.
But sometimes it's quite difficult to penetrate whether it's become a weekly boarding school or not. And you've got to ask your headmaster, you've got to ask for advice, you've got to ask people who are there. Get under the skin of what the school really is, not what it wants to be or wants to portray.
But anyway, there's lots out there, and it's a great thing place to go. I would say I think it really is fantastic. And then our last point to move at is 16. So to move for sixth form, and I think this often happens if you've moved from a single-sex school, maybe that started at 11, because 11 to 18, frankly, is quite a long time to be in the same place, and you maybe want to have an experience of co-ed, or even of boarding. And what's your view on that, moving just for those 2 years? I mean, do you think it's enough?
I've got a very simple view. I think if it's an option between going boarding at 16 and not going boarding at 16, you go boarding at 16. That's it. Yeah. It's better to have loved and to have whatever lost than never to have loved. I think it's a really important thing that they go at all. Yeah. So obviously starting at 8 is the obvious solution and answer. But if you're going to choose between not and going at all, then obviously the last 2 years, those sixth form years,
and
really,
I think
really
you said
key.
it definitely, you feel it helps at university, having boarded at some point.
Absolutely.
Before.
I'm not going to say what we said last night, but I knew some individuals who are pink fluffy slipper wearers, and I'm sorry if you wear pink fluffy slippers, but there was a lot of slopping around, and you do, I do sometimes as well. But they were not prepared, and they were deeply unhappy at university, and they never quite got over the fact they weren't at home. So that's my personal experience. I said I wasn't going to just say that, but I just did. Okay. So yes, really, really clever way of segueing into university life.